My name is Vikram. I'm going to be like tethered here. The clicker is not working, so I'm going to be hanging out behind this. We'll occasionally be staring at the screen so I know what y'all are looking at. Because everyone able to see the slides? Are they clear? Cool. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Vikram, and I'm going to be talking to you today about citymeetings.nyc, which is a project I've been working on for a little over a year at this point, where I use AI to make city council proceedings accessible to the public. Before I get into it, a little bit about me. I've been building software for close to 20 years, largely at early stage companies. And over the last 5 to 7 years, I've been consulting as like an interim or fractional CTO for early stage startups, which has afforded me downtime at various points in time to work on other things. And in like late 2023 and early 2024, that was citymeetings.nyc. As it turns out, the project really kind of took a whole life of its own last year. And I've been working on it more or less full time for most of this year so far. And that is what I'm going to be talking to you about today, if I'm able to change the slide. Oh, here we go. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you all about today. So I want to talk a bit about what citymeetings.nyc is. I'm curious, just with a show of hands, how many people have heard of citymeetings.nyc before? Oh my gosh, it's amazing. How many individuals here have used it? And how many individuals have used it professionally for work? Okay, cool. Oh my gosh, fun. All right, great. So we're going to talk about what citymeetings.nyc is. I'm going to talk about the impact that it's had. And then I'm going to go dive into the nitty gritty, like how I actually achieve the kind of artifacts that you see on City Meetings every single day. So let us dive in. When you go to City Meetings, this is what you see. It is, I have a little blurb at the top about what the site is. There's a newsletter subscription form. I encourage you all to sign up for the newsletter. And then I have a brag section at the bottom where I link to nice things that people have said about the site. But if you scroll down further, what you'll find is a list of meetings that looks like this. And they will have the latest meetings that the city council has had, whether it's a stated meeting, a vote, a hearing, land use hearing, whatever. They'll all be there. And all these have the committee name, a high level summary of the duration of the meeting. The summary is just there to really get you situated. So let's say we want to dig into this committee on education hearing that was almost 12 hours long as part of the prelim budget hearings on March 13th. When you click in, you'll see the summary and stuff at the top, but if you scroll down just a little bit, this is the main event, which are meeting chapters. And a chapter in City Meetings parlance is like a section of a meeting that is between 30 seconds to 5 minutes long, generally. And I break these meetings down comprehensively so that you can link to and view a 1 minute and a half section of a very lengthy hearing. And I also tag these by whether they're a city official giving testimony, a member of the public giving testimony, or like Q&A or remarks by some council member and city official. So when you click in on one of these, this is what you see. On the right is a public testimony by the president of UFT. On the left is a little Q&A chapter where a council member is talking about with DOE officials about class size stuff. Each of these chapters comes with a title, a summary, the video that starts at that point in time, and you click on the transcript if you want to read it as well. And so if you are at UFT and you want to share this testimony on your site, this 3-minute segment of this 12-hour hearing, you can. And that was actually just not possible before. If you're an advocacy group and you care about class size, you can take this chapter on the left. I don't know if this left one is. There are a bunch of class size folks who are focused on this meeting right now. And so they've been sharing a bunch of chapters of social and like their advocacy pages and things like that. So that's what City Meetings is. I think about City Meetings as turning meetings into navigable indexes versus a soup of content. I'll talk about what that is in a sec. But if you go to the meeting page, you can with your browser search, do keyword search and look for class size, let's say, and you'll find 35 matches. You can scroll down and find, there may be 10 minutes in the whole 12-hour hearing where any of this was discussed. So that's what City Meetings is. I want to talk about Legistar for a second. Who here has used Legistar before? Who here likes Legistar? Noah. Oh my gosh. Okay, I thought I'd find at least one person who. I don't mind it. I think I'm in there all the time. It is hard to use, but it's possible. And if you go to Legistar, this is what you'll see on the front page: a list of meetings. I scroll down a bunch. So this is a segment where you can find the same community on education meeting that happened on March 13th. It's that one that's highlighted in maybe you can't see the highlight, but It's right here. You can see that all these have meeting details, agenda, minutes, and video. And if you click on the agenda and minutes, this is what you see. This is all you get for 12 hours of content. These documents exist entirely to comply with the law. They're not actually useful. The best thing you might actually get from them are that there will be bills that are discussed at this particular meeting. You'll also have the video, which is great. It's mandated by law. It's awesome that we do this. You'll notice here that there is this person like falling asleep in the background, this individual who's like, looks like they're about to cry in the foreground. And these are all proxies for how you might feel trying to figure out what transpired at this meeting when you're like carefully scrubbing through it. I actually accidentally took this clip. This was not purposeful, but I thought it was funny. But yeah, I mean, it's 12 hours. It's long. So the video is great. You can also get transcripts, but they arrived pretty late. I created the slide on March 24th, a few days ago. I haven't checked today. Maybe someone can, but the transcript at the time was not available for this meeting. And even when you do get transcripts, they're very long. So this is a stated meeting. The stated meeting is 1.5 hours long. It's very procedural, easy. Most D pages are going to be like roll call and stuff like that. For that DOE hearing, you're going to get to close to 1,000 pages of transcript. And while that's useful, you can like search through it. It's going to be really hard to know what happened. Turns out that a lot of people enjoy or get value out of like searching and navigating a city council meeting with city meetings. And they have been over the past year. When I launched this back in February, which was like sort of functionally zero traffic at the time, it was functionally zero traffic, but since then it's grown considerably. I got hundreds of visitors daily, over 10,000 visitors monthly to the site. About 50% plus of them are all search traffic. And all of this is organic. I don't actually spend much time growing this. There's a lot of niche content there that people are looking for, and this is just the city council. I haven't expanded beyond that. I also have this newsletter. It has over 900 subscribers at the moment. The makeup, I think, is really interesting. Like half of them are professionals. I'll dive into that in a bit. And then the other half are all like engaged citizens. And there are 28 New York City and New York State agencies represented on the mailing list, looking at their domain names. And so there are a lot of folks in city government who use it. Indeed, the most active users of city meetings are professionals. So this little survey on the left pops up when you click on a lot of chapters on the site, when you like click on 5 or 6 or 7 times so that I know you're committed, you're looking for something clearly. The survey comes up, and I put together this pie chart a month or two ago, but at the time it was like 30% government, about 30% a soup of public affairs and advocacy, which is like nonprofit advocacy, lobbying firms, and public affairs firms. And then there's media, which is a small number, but they're mighty in terms of bringing sort of citations and linking to the site and covering it. And then there are, engaged citizenry falling under other. And professionals use the site for a lot of different reasons. They primarily use it for research, but they come to it from different angles. Are folks able to see these? Yeah. Okay, cool. So New York City agencies, InterGov is probably the primary user of city meetings on site. So these are folks who are trying to track what's happening across many legislative bodies or rules bodies or whatever. And then there are also policy researchers that are looking for policy gaps or trying to figure out where the winds are blowing or doing public testimony analysis and things like that. You can do that far more easily using city meetings. City council uses it for committee prep and follow-up, advocacy, lobbying, and public affairs. They often write reports internally or for clients around what transpired, what a specific legislator said, etc. And the journalists research it for stories, and they also commonly link to primary sources. I prepared this slide a while ago. This is a very small sample of articles and outlets that have linked to city meetings and things they've written. But I've lost track of how many times this happens now. A week or two ago, Hellgate wrote a bunch of stuff about sidewalk cafes. You may have caught that. They linked to city meetings on there as well. So you could find chapters where Bob Holden is talking about a sidewalk cafe in Queens, and then Christopher Marte is talking about a sidewalk cafe in Lower East Side. And so this is really common as well. People also share it a lot. So if you're an advocacy group, you might want to share the testimony you gave and amplify that advocacy. In the past, you would not have been able to do that unless you had a PDF and asked folks to click through to it and look at it. But you can say hey, I was there and this is what I said. And then, various groups will also share specific sections to advocate for something. Like, here's what the city official said and we don't like it, or here's what this council member said and we love it. So they do that too. And finally, the media has also covered city meetings a bunch. I was on a news interview at New York One Spectrum News in October. Hellgate wrote what might be the most flattering headline I've ever seen. And then and I was on the city and state list. And recently, I share all this partially to toot my own horn because I do greatly enjoy the attention. But I also really want to point out that like I think you'd be hard pressed to find like artifacts that are really only made possible by AI that are this well regarded outside folks in the tech industry. Like I think it's just hard, and I think something special is happening here before it because of it. So like media is pretty actively hostile to AI. Yet this is a use case that folks can get behind. There are a lot of folks in government who use it. I would say folks in government generally more risk averse, yet they trust this, and so I think that is a big deal. Getting to this point took a significant amount of time. So the story for City Meetings starts in December 2023. I sent out an email to a bunch of friends and said, hey, I am going to take one of the newest AI models, and I'm going to like look at public records, and I will try and write this newsletter every week. And they indulged me. It turns out this is a crazy thing to do because there's too much to cover. So there's a lot going on in City Council. Not all of it is super important. All of it is important to at least one person, but not all of it is super important. And then often it requires a great deal more context to cover what's going on there. Like the public records do not ever tell the whole story. But what I did find was that like public hearings are just really hard to access. Like even with the AI models, I did not know where to start. I don't know what kinds of questions were asked. I don't know what was like, if you're going at it, if you're in government or a lobbyist or whatever, you go to a meeting and you're like, yeah, this is what I want to know. But if you're like, what actually happened? That's a lot harder. And so I decided to start out with this like index idea. What if I could do that? So I built this prototype. It more or less launched to crickets, but there were like a couple of people who were excited by it, and I was encouraged by that. So I kept working on it. I also felt like the problem of doing this sort of tickled me, and I was like, all right, let me figure out how to do it. So this is on my blog. You can take a look at it. The UI looked very different back then, but all the artifacts are there. There's like the chapter titles on the left panel. There's the like title summary in the middle panel, and then there's like the video and the transcript there. In February, I launched City Meetings, also mostly at crickets, but more people started taking a look and checking it out. And I had this talk at School of Data that was right around the corner. And then late March, like weirdly, that post went viral. And one of the most exciting things in the history of this project has ever happened, which is N.K. Jemisin reposted it because she are folks familiar with N.K. Jemisin? She's one of my favorite authors. She wrote a bunch of great fantasy novels. She wrote a duology based in New York City, and she was using Legistar, which is the city site here for research, which I found very fun. That was great. And then I gave this talk last year. You can watch it on YouTube. It was in this room. I also annotated all the slides on my blog. So you can go take a look and skim it and, link people to specific slides. I gave that talk. I was very proud of it. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to start publishing this every day now. And then I ran into this problem over the course of the next month where my tools started to fail. Like they just did not work. From April through about August, I was just banging my head on a keyboard trying to get this to work. I tried a lot of stuff, and I'm going to discuss what all that looked like in this talk, like what the issues were and what solved it. And then, mid-July, I'm still working on it, and I'm like, oh, I'll be talking about it at some point, and here I am, I'm talking about it. And then in mid-August, was the first time I was actually able to get every meeting published same or next day. And that was when things really changed, because at that point, you could come to citymeetings.nyc if there was a meeting that mattered to you the day before and know that it was there. And that's been true since September. So people do it all the time. If it matters to you for work, you're there. If it matters to you for the advocacy you're doing, it's there. And so that concludes sort of the context. I'm going to pause for like just a second. If anyone has like one burning question, I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, I'll just keep moving on. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to talk now about how I'm able to publish these artifacts on City Meetings every day. I'm going to start with first how I do the chapterizing. That's what I call it, but how I break down these hearings into granular chapters the same day. I encourage you all to check out last year's talk if you're interested. I give folks like a crash course on prompting. I talk about language models at a high level and how they work, if that's something that is interesting to you. And then I also provide really detailed information on my methodology last year. I'm not going to go into all that detail here. I will be discussing it at a high level so you all have enough context to learn what the problems were there and how I solved them here. But you can go check this out. And let's begin. How do I do this? So stepping back, This is a slide from 2024, so you'll see this little tag down the left. But the stepping back, this is the process that I follow when I am publishing a meeting on City Meetings. I get an AI transcription from a service called DeepGram. And then steps 2, 3, and 4 are me having the AI do a bunch of stuff and then me fixing it and being in the loop, which is a central tenet in all the work that I do here. It has to be reviewed. Otherwise, it's not really that trustworthy. And then finally, I publish it when I feel good about it. So let's zoom into creating chapters. When I started this work last year, I did not totally understand what would make a useful chapter. It was the first time that I was like, oh, I should create an index that's useful. I had no idea really how city council meetings really ran. And I didn't know what was interesting or important. And so I manually created about 300 chapters to start to understand and come to some conclusions around what a good chapter looks like. And these were some of the assumptions that I arrived at the time. Said a good city meetings chapter starts at the beginning of a council member's question, an individual's public testimony, standalone remarks by a council member, or a procedural section, largely because I wanted to avoid them. But and then they ended at the conclusion of those things, more or less. Last year's approach, important to note, was that I had the AI do a bunch of work across 3 steps. I detail all those 3 steps in my talk last year, but they looked roughly like this. I would take 10,000 tokens at a time of a transcript, and then I would ask it to find the start of those chapters as defined in the assumption. I had these prompts that had all those assumptions baked into them. And then I'd go through each of those starts of those chapters, have them write the ending and write the title and summary. And then I'd have to edit the title and summary to conform to some standards. So I'd have to do all this stuff, and then I'd review it afterwards and fix it as necessary. So if you think about, delegating work to AI and having it live on this continuum, like this is kind of where my approach a year ago would fall. I just had the AI do a ton of work before I did anything at all. But the problem was it produced way too many errors that took too long to fix. And there are a few root causes to this. One, my assumptions were way too rigid. They didn't really apply to anything. Let's take a look at a couple of them. If you've watched Yale Brewer ever ask questions at a council meeting, she will ask 10 in rapid fire mode, like in a row, because she's like, I'm going to use my 5 minutes incredibly well. I'm going to get answers to all of these, and I'm going to ask all these 10 questions, and the city official is going to answer all of them. And when you have this rigid prompt about a chapter starting at those points, what you get are 10 questions and 10 chapters that just cover a question. And that is just not useful. Like, that's not a useful way to break this down. Individual's testimony, that is the public testimony piece is the only assumption that has survived the full year. Other issues are like Lincoln Ressler tends to be a fairly verbose council member. So he'll talk for a long time and make sort of standalone remarks. And then after that, he'll ask a question. It's really unclear whether or not the question is related to it. But, if you're examining it, what's going on, you can figure it out. But the AI just gets confused and makes a bunch of bad chapters. And then the procedural section one is weird, where I really only wanted to find them so I could avoid them. But it turns out when you talk about it, you're litigating what a procedural section is within language model, and it sometimes will disagree. It's actually better just to be like, here's what I want, and it's better figuring that out, at least for this use case in particular. So going back to here, last year's approach took produced all these errors. This is one of the issues. Related, I really just overfit my methodology to a subset of meetings that I was looking at the time. I had about like two months to build this and prepare this talk at the time, and I was looking at maybe 5 meetings, and so I overfit a lot of it, and it didn't really work. My assumptions didn't really, there are many issues with that. And then finally, the third problem is that when you have AI do a bunch of work in multiple steps and you don't supervise it, all the errors compound. So if there are errors in step 1, by step 3, you just get garbage output. And this is what I started getting in April, and I was very frustrated, and I wasn't able to get these meetings out same day. Today, my work looks like sort of lives kind of in the middle of the spectrum, where I have me in the loop helping it along the way. 2 insights drive my current approach. Neither is particularly earth-shattering, but I did spend a lot of time arriving at these and had to test a bunch of assumptions around what AI could actually do and how these meetings were even structured. Turns out that if you write a fairly general prompt to say, hey, model some of the topics here, and then break this into chapters that are useful, that's not the prompt. I go into more detail, but it's possible to write a prompt and have it work well if I give the AI small coherent chunks. A small coherent chunk is when one council member has the floor. You can see similar speech patterns. Topically, it's all the same. Same goes for, when someone's giving testimony. And then the other thing, if that is true, was that I had to make sure that I was able to find such chunks scalably and efficiently. And two things are true. Government meetings by design have many of these because they're so procedural. And AI is also very good at finding them. And so during that time, I had a lot of assumptions that I was trying to test. And if multiple assumptions were true, and then I could maybe stitch them together to make it work. And these two assumptions really helped me. My process looks roughly like this. If you assume that black bar on the left is a transcript that's 5 hours long, and that's a timeline from top to bottom, the first thing I will do is I will go into there and mark these major sections of a meeting. This is where the opening remarks happen. This is where agency testimony happens, council questioning, then public testimony. Almost every hearing at the city council looks like this. This isn't what every meeting looks like. There are different types of sections. Sometimes you'll have multiple agencies giving testimony. Land use looks a little different. And then votes and stated meetings look different. You just create different sections for those. But for the purpose of this example, I go in and I give it a leg up by doing this. And it takes me maybe 30 seconds to 5 minutes at most. And then I tell the AI to go off and find all of the chunks that matter. So for opening remarks and council questioning, I'm like, hey, AI, can you go find every time a new council member has taken the floor? And then similar things for agency testimony and public testimony. It goes off and does that and gives me some output. I can go and fix it at that point. And that doesn't take me very long because it tends to be quite accurate. And then finally, I have these small coherent chunks that I know I can break into chapters if I've got the right prompts, which in this case I did. I want to show you what my tools look like in practice. This is the screen that I'm in every day that there is a city council meeting. We've got the video on the top right, the transcript on the bottom left, the bottom right. And over here, I have a little panel open where I'm dragging a bunch of sentences to mark them and say, this is part of the opening remarks section. So these tools work well enough and they take me very little time. Here's me. I created the remarks section. The timeline has now appeared on the left. The next thing I do is I found the agency testimony section, then the council questioning section, and finally, public testimony. This is a DSNY hearing that happened this week for the preliminary budget. And then the next thing I do is I tell the AI to go and find the beginnings of all of the sort of small coherent chunks that I discussed. You can see over here, there's a little square. It says council member has the floor. In this case, both the remarks and the agency testimony are not really that interesting. There's one person who's giving testimony or one council member has the floor. That is often, but not always the case. Let's go down to something a little more interesting. This is every one of these squares is a moment that a new council member has the floor. And if I look at this marker that I've got highlighted here at about 50 minutes, all the way down to the next marker that's at about an hour, that is my coherent chunk. That's when one council member has the floor, and I can take that and give it over to AI and it will figure it out. And then I do the same thing for public testimony. After that, I'll check it and fix it as necessary. That does not take me very long. And then I have my prompts go and create these chapters. And I have this timeline. Each of these spans is one chapter across the whole timeline. And I can click on it and edit the title and summary or the boundaries or types and things like that. I have this screenshot. Why do I have this? I have the screenshot here because I wanted to point out that these are lined up perfectly. So you can see that all of those yellow public testimony markers line up at the beginning of each of these chapters. And so this is this breaking down and chunking methodology in practice. Now, that's how I break things down. You may be thinking, okay, that's cool. You're able to break this down, but how are you able to get these to be accurate? How do you know you can trust that information? And that is a somewhat different problem. Last year, when I was working on this, I did review every single chapter that went out. If there were 300 chapters, I read them and I looked at the transcripts. I've spent a ton of time just staring at summaries and transcripts over the last year. And the benefit of that is one, I knew that whatever I published at the time would be trustworthy. And so I could test this hypothesis, which is if I put trustworthy breakdowns on the internet, does anyone care? It turns out they do, and that's great. But the other thing I could do was start to classify every single error that I found and start to understand, are these errors going down? Am I able to solve them? What can I do instead? These are the three classes of accuracy errors that I found. One was what I call outright hallucination, which is that I define that as there's literally nothing in the transcript that relates to the title and summary. So for example, if you're going to say like, I really support intro 989, the title and summary say this person likes cheese, like that is an outright hallucination. This sort of thing really doesn't happen as much. It used to be a problem for a lot of the early, even frontier models, but AI models have gotten good enough where I do not have to worry about this. And y'all may have seen that too. The other error that I see are contextual hallucinations. AI models have allowed this to get, have helped me a great deal here as well. I define this as when the transcript actually does discuss the topic, but the title and summary don't accurately reflect what's in there. Like it took the transcript and it's like, so maybe someone said, I support intro 989, and then the summary says like, I don't support, this person does not support intro 989 and hates the city council or whatever. Like that would be a version of that, an egregious one. What happens, this does happen, but when it happens, it's very subtle. I have this email that I got from an individual. I invite corrections all the time. It doesn't happen super frequently, but people do email me. This is a transcript from an email where someone is taking a paragraph or two to explain the subtle wording choices in a one bullet of the summary, which I did appreciate, and he did have a point, and I changed it. But his point was that I didn't say I claimed this. I just believed this to be true, and like that was very careful wording. Now, if it's going to take multiple paragraphs to explain that kind of error, like I'm okay with that sort of thing existing and fixing it books like me too. So it does happen. It's usually a lot more subtle. And then the last class is when a human would fail at the task as well. Like I'm just not giving enough context for it. Here is a pathological example. This is a testimony that someone gave at a project hearing. Does anyone know what this is about? Everyone would fail this test. So I don't know what Nissan Hirsch is. I don't know what project this is. But this is what that testimony is. This is at the Willits Point proposal meeting. There's Evan Hook from East Elmhurst, not Nissan Hirsch, who supports the New York City Football Club project. I did not make this. I did not actually make this correction and figure out East Elmhurst on its own, and which I found very surprising, even with what I was able to do. This is solvable just by providing broad context every time you also ask it to create a chapter. So following, all the stuff, I'm like, here's what a chapter looks like, and here's how I want you to break it down. I say, this is a meeting about the Willits Point Stadium, New York City Football Club. Like I actually go have the AI get all the terms of art and entities mentioned at a high level summary, and it primes it to make the right choices. And it does some very surprising things sometimes, like figure out that Nissan Hirsch is East Elmhurst, which it actually was when you click on it. It's obvious to a human.
So when you were doing all of this, was it all by yourself, or did you solicit input from other pros to confirm accuracy of your summary?
I guess I solicit input by virtue of people emailing me and using it. Like I think enough people see it at this point, and have pointed things out. It was a lot faster for me to sort of do a feedback loop on my own. And I think in many of these cases, sure, there are cases where I would see the transcript. I'm like, I don't know what some of these words are. There's a lot of jargon here and acronyms. I don't get it. But by and large, like I was able to be like, yeah, this works or it doesn't. So
it's all determined out. Were you familiar with government terminology prior to this project?
Not a tremendous amount of it, but now I am. Yeah, I just did a lot of research. I spent a ton of time both Yeah.
Now that you've been manually labeling sections for, I guess, like on the order of like 6 or 8 months or whatever, like, do you see any way to like streamline it again? Like either via like, hey, you have Processify now, outsource that to whatever other people, or like find your own LLM at some point for that, or?
Yeah, I think your question was, is there a way to, have you figured out a way to streamline some of this process?
Yeah.
So for the first time, someone has been helping me identify speakers, which I'm going to talk about in a sec. That has been a tremendous amount of effort. I still need to do a bit more work on my tools so that anyone can go off and use it. Like I'm literally at a terminal being like extract chapters, like that is, but yeah. So part of it is that, and then I have a bunch of ideas for how to make it faster and better. I just don't currently have the time to work on them, and organization. Yeah. I'm gonna take one more question. Okay, all right, go for it.
Have you noticed a significant improvement in like your transfer quality or robustness of the synthesization with maybe like large language models or?
No, absolutely I have. Like, so the models are getting very good. So 2 things. DeepGram is this like AI transcription service that I use. They're pretty cheap and they're good. They like their frontier sort of performance. I don't use Whisper because it just takes too much work to like stitch it together and then host and like use it. But Deepgram's transcripts have gotten significantly better. There was a time when like it didn't know about NYCHA, so it kept saying nitro instead or nitrogen. It doesn't do that anymore. It doesn't do that for a whole lot of things. I'm guessing that it wouldn't come up with Nissan Hirsch now for East Elmhurst. It'd probably figure it out. And then the models are getting very good at as I mentioned, it doesn't hallucinate in massive ways. The summaries are getting very good. They're getting better at like following my basic editorial rules. Like there was a long time where like language models would just editorialize in completely pointless ways. They'll be like, this really highlights the problem in this community. I'm like, actually, I'm not sure if this is we're all here to discuss whether or not this is. And, it's not helpful. It's not a helpful sort of piece in the summary. So yeah, I'm going to move on. I'll have time for questions at the end. So the next thing I want to talk about is speaker identification. So in a given day where there might be 5 meetings, I have to verify the names, roles, and organizations of up to 200 people maybe. And that takes a tremendous amount of time. I have AI help me. That is an important input downstream to this chapter stuff because we need to know who a council member is, who a member of the public is, or a city official. And knowing that, Gail Brewer from the council said this is important versus speaker label 1. Stepping back, this is the process. We're going to go into speaker identification. The transcripts that I receive from Deepgram are diarized, which is a fancy word that means it identifies when different speakers are speaking in the transcript. Diarization in this domain is that you can see that first sentence was spoken by speaker label 1, then the second was speaker label 3, and the last several were all speaker label 5, but you don't know that speaker 1 was Councilmember Gutierrez, or speaker 3 was Martha Norick, or speaker 5 was Zachary Fenner of Open Data Program. So I need to go and figure that out. My tools, they look like this. You might recall this is sort of what my chapter stuff looks like, but instead I have a panel that shows me all of the speakers that the AI has figured out. And then I have to go through each and verify that the name, role, and organization is correct and spelled correctly. And I have these buttons that allow me to click through different times that they've spoken in the transcript so I can hear them and watch the video or whatever. But that's what it looks like. And it turns out to be quite complicated, surprisingly. This problem is harder than chapter extraction, in my view. And the reason it's complicated are for a few reasons. One, all of the transcripts that I get, they have diarization errors. A diarization error is when a speaker label is assigned to the wrong person. Over here, this is Robert Tucker, commissioner of the FDNY, giving testimony. He's speaker label 5. And then sentences 71 through 74, turns out someone else popped in to complete all the sentences, and that's speaker label 6. That's not true. You look at this and you read it and you hear it. It's obviously just a misdiarization. But that's one error. I would consider this to actually be an immaterial one. If you're a professional who's reading a transcript and you see this, you can figure it out and be like, yeah, I don't care. That's fine. Or AI doesn't really trip up AI either. It'll understand that too. But there are significant misdiarizations. Let's say speaker label 14 was Vikram giving testimony and then Joe giving testimony. And speaker label 14 was labeled as Vikram. In the output at the end, you'll see that Vikram gave testimony twice, and that's wrong. So I want to avoid stuff like that. Misspelled names. So there's a lot of mistranscription, and it just I just have to deal with these. Obviously, it's not Noel Hidalgo, Executive Director of BetaNYC. It is Noel Hidalgo, Executive Director of BetaNYC, and so I have to go fix that. If there's a transcription error, it goes straight into the name, role, and organization. Although sometimes, depending on the knowledge that language models have about the world, if Jessica Tish was talking and it was TISH or whatever, there's enough about the Tish family and Jessica Tish broadly on the internet that language models can figure it out, but it doesn't always. Another challenge is that speakers are sometimes introduced in vastly different places in transcripts. So in this case, the chancellor of New York City Public Schools, Melissa Ramos, this is common. Leaders will start their testimony and say, I'm joined by these people and this staff. And then later on, when the staff, enters and answers a question, they won't introduce themselves. They won't be introduced. And so if Melissa Ramos was speaker 5 and Emma Videra was speaker 14, there are actually there's a lot of reasoning to do to figure out that speaker 14 is actually Emma Videra. This is a screenshot from the website, which is why you don't have labels. In summary, these are the issues that I have. My methodology to date has relied on chunking transcripts, so I focus on one speaker, and I talk about this at great length in my talk last year, but I want to show you what chunks look like at a high level here. What I do is I have today I have I asked the language model to identify one speaker at a time. So in this case, I'm asking it to identify speaker 7, and then I'm going to give it every instance that speaker 7 has spoken. And an instance is when speaker 7 speaks and there's neighboring context before and after. And so if you look at this, it's obvious that speaker 7 is VL Brewer, assuming that these aren't significantly misdiarized. Generally, this works because they're so procedural and because people will like introduce new speakers or self-introduce or thank each other. Like you can figure it out most of the time. But it doesn't solve everything. It doesn't solve misspellings because if there are spelling errors, like this methodology doesn't really fix that. They'll just go into the answer. If there are multiple diarization errors, like the things were significantly misdiarized, then it has to pick one. So Vikram and Joe are giving testimony, it'd be like Vikram, but now I'm left with like holding the bag and trying to figure out like, is this significantly misdiarized later? And I have to go check that. And then for people being introduced far away, you're not going to have enough context in one of those chunks for this introduction by the chancellor away like 10, 15 minutes prior. So these are the errors. Turns out that verifying and fixing identified speakers is a tremendous amount of work. The most I've had to do for one meeting was 336 for the City of Yes public hearing. It was day 2. But it is pretty common to have over 100 speakers in here. Like it's preliminary budget season. This has happened like 3 or 4 times. So it really takes up a lot of time. So my current methodology, which is really new, for the full year, I had all these ideas around how I might go about fixing this. And so I had little bits of code where I'd test the same assumption with every new model that came out as quickly as possible. And if it passed enough of those tests, I'd be like, I think I can get this to work. Sort of like what I was talking about earlier, where I had a bunch of like assumptions and insights for chapter stuff. Plot 37 Sonnet was the first to actually pass those things. And that happened 4 weeks ago. So this is really new. I threw this together a few weeks ago. I'm still working out the kinks. It's not perfect, but it still saves a tremendous amount of time. The methodology here looks very different. It looks like my initial attempts that I ever used in like 2024. Here's what that methodology looks like. This is me sending the language model an entire transcript that's like 50 to 100,000 tokens, which might have 20 to 100 speakers. And I'm asking the language model to figure out the speaker's name, role, and organization for every single one of the speakers in there. And historically, this has been cheap and inaccurate. This has been cheap. That's great, but it just doesn't work. I might as well do all the work from the beginning. This still doesn't work, unfortunately. However, let's constrain the problem. Let's ask the language model to do one thing across the whole transcript instead. And so in this case, I'm asking it to identify one speaker label, which means that if I have 20 speaker labels, I'm asking it to do this 20 times, which has historically turned out to be very expensive and also inaccurate. But this is actually not true with Plot 37 Sonnet and some of the reasoning stuff that it does. I talked a little bit about this last year, but language models historically have not been able to process large context windows super well because of a well-documented problem called the lost in the middle problem. There are like papers written about it, but there's also a lot of anecdotal evidence. Like if you throw a lot of context at a language model, it tends to heavily weight like a lot of context at the beginning and the end, leaving this kind of valley that's in the middle that it loses. It just doesn't really do good work. But I have examples of this happening in my talk last year that you can take a look. But in 2025, this is getting better. I might actually be good at it, and this is starting to change. So here's what speaker identification version 2 looks like now. I'm presenting this information a little differently. Anything in white here is my code sending the language model something. Anything in orange is the language model sending me something back. And this 1 and 2 are just like steps. So the first thing I do is my code says, for speaker label 1 in the whole transcript, do an analysis, figure out what the likeliest name, role, and organization is, and also provide a bunch of potential search queries I can use to go and verify who this is, because in practice, that's what I do. Like I will search for null Ydelgo by NYC, and Google will give me a little bit of a leg up that way. It does the analysis, it gives me the probable name, role, and org, and it tells me to search for some things. My code will go and perform the searches. I'll grab the searches, I'll kick them back over to the LLM in this conversation, and I'll say, cool, you have everything you need. Give me the best answer you can. And it does that. This methodology, if it works, already solves 2 of our major speaker identification challenges because I provide it the entire transcript. Theoretically, it should be able to do all the reasoning to figure out that Emma Videra is speaker label 14 here. And you actually see this with Claude 37 Sonnet. Like I've read the thinking and it'll be like, speaker level 14 seems to be a senior member of the administration, and they're talking about finance stuff. It looks like the commissioner or chancellor or whatever introduced these people. The 2 finance people are Emma Videra and Sarita Scott, but based on this other, and you'll read it and it's like astonishing, and it works with alarming consistency. So that is, that's one thing. And then the other thing it helps with are misspelled names, because now I can go and search for this, and this is what that looks like. It'll give me this response. It'll be like, it's probably Noel Hidalgo from BetaNYC based on the transcript. Go search for these. And if you yourself go and search for them, you'll get the right answer at the top because Google will fix spelling errors. It's exceptional at that. So I'm just relying on that, really. It's a little bit of a hack and it works really well. But this is what I do manually. So there's that. And then the last thing I do is I have this evaluation step to flag errors. Yes, I have this evaluation step. And what I do here is I provide a little bit of reduced context to let some language model judge whether or not the answers are good and then flag it for me. I give it the speaker chunks that I talked about earlier. I do that because I want to constrain the problem a little bit, and because I use the same model. If the model was not able to process 100,000 tokens last time, I can't reasonably expect that it would work. And I have tested it, like it's fairly consistent. So what I want to do is give it a little bit of different context and give me a new perspective on the answer. So I give it the chunks, which are imperfect, but that's fine. Sometimes I have it say, like, if you don't have enough evidence, just tell me you don't have enough evidence and I will look at it. And then I also give it the answer from the last step. And it tells me either, hey, this is great, or it's flagged. This is what my tools look like now. It's basically the same. There's some more stuff. I have these review flags when there's stuff I need to look into. In the middle here, this says flagged for review because significant misdiarizations exist. And I can read that and rapidly be like, okay, cool, I should go take a look at this. And this turns out to be a lot faster. Let's take a look at another speaker. This is someone from the 3rd Avenue bid. I can read the evaluation and get situated. Like, how did it arrive at this conclusion that this is the person? And then I can also scroll down a little bit and I have screenshots of the search results so I can look at them really quickly. And I don't have to open like 5 tabs and do all this research. I can stay in this one screen. And a lot of the time that really goes a long way. If you have all the context you need to judge whether an answer is good, that's like takes you a great deal of the way. But this is not, I don't fully trust that yet. I'm still figuring it out. I still review all of it, but that is that. That concludes kind of the content that I had for this talk. But I want to leave y'all with one last thing, which is, like, I think a lot is nearly possible by trawling the public record using AI. I think there's some very exciting things possible. Not only can you make meetings accessible like this, but, you know, I have a directory of like everyone who's spoken at a city council for the last 1.5 years. And if you were trying to build a coalition in New York City, like you can go and ask a question and say, hey, like, who has ever mentioned support of the thing that I care about? And who should I be reaching out to? I suspect there are a lot of hidden coalitions in these meetings that will that are easier to find. You could do like broad scale policy research. Like you could even do research for court transcripts. Like, how are judges ruling? On what points are they at various of these court proceedings to try and get stats on that. You can also get, you know, reports of things every day. There's a meeting or 5 meetings that might have mattered to you. Did anything come up that you care about? That's also tractable and easier and more canonical. So I'm going to plug one thing, which is that I'm working on services and software to do this. If that is something you want to talk about at some point, please come say hi. But also if you want to talk about city meetings, that's cool too. I want to talk about that. I've been working on that for over a year now. But thank you very much. That's my talk. I have you keep little pins over here if you want to come grab one at some point. But yeah. Sorry, questions? I'll start there.
Sure. It's curious how you maintain state and context as you, say, migrate from Claude 3.5 to Claude 3.7. You don't have to go and retrain all the same issues here.
I will take exactly my methodology and then I'll apply it to the new model. it's relatively easy for me to quickly evaluate how good it is because it's so interactive. Like I see the output, and if I'm like, wow, this is a non-starter, it's not scientific, it's anecdotal. But yeah, that's more or less how I do it. I don't have like an evaluation framework or anything. It's just I'm in the loop doing it anyway. So
But you've got specific enough instructions to say, and it's chunked enough that you can say, make this API halt, now do this then, now do this then.
yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I might have to rewrite some of my code, but it's not too hard.
Cool.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Great presentation. It's exciting to see all of the development as well. I was curious, you mentioned as you're building more service capabilities, how do you balance prioritization between like public interest and commercialization of tool?
Yeah, it's a good question. Right now I have made $0 on all of this. So my current prioritization is just to stay alive. Like that's it. I think it's an important question. I don't have like a good answer right now. But if I want this to continue, I need 4 sources of funding or revenue. And so the way that I'm thinking about it very concretely right now is the city council stuff should continue. Should someone be interested in doing more of this and be willing to fund it, I'm interested in having that conversation. But anything that's sort of like funding or revenue generating right now is a priority. In the future, though, I want to continue doing all this stuff for the public interest. I think it's helpful to have this. And then there are sets of people who have professional needs that are a little different, but this can serve everyone else just fine.
Going up the section of talking, I luckily hear on this test that you did versus what the AI did. You was just like,
Yes.
and also like why, I guess, why should tests are kind of better done by a human versus by an AI?
Yeah. So on the left is a transcript that's done by an AI. Then there are high level like meeting chunk like sections that's done by me. I think this is totally tractable for AI to do, but mostly I wanted to focus on the downstream things because those were really time consuming for me to do. Like if I'm going in and checking all the council members, if I'm going in and writing summaries and titles, it's this project can't exist. So while I will have the AI do this like broad section stuff eventually, I'm like, whatever, I'm fine doing it now. So I don't want to add another thing to the mix. The AI does the next part, which is to identify all these chunks and then I fix them also. And then the AI creates chapters and then I review and fix those as necessary. And the reason I do it that way is because those things are the time consuming parts. So.
Hey, Vikram, I have a question, but I also use City Meetings, so I just wanted to say thanks for that. As someone who does activism, specifically pro-housing activism in my spare time, it's become an indispensable resource, so really appreciate it, and would definitely recommend it to anyone who has an interest in following government, either professionally or just as a way of getting more involved in the community. It's a super helpful tool. My question is related to kind of the age-old development and systems design problem of controlling complexity. I think especially when you're working on something yourself, the more you build, the more complexity becomes a factor, and it can be hard to like incrementally add features and stuff. So just wanted to get your take on like what methods or philosophies have been helpful for you on this project to control the complexity.
That's a good question. I probably follow the same general philosophies I do when I'm like working on teams or doing any early stage work, which is like I find where all of the risk is. If X, Y, or Z are not possible, then this cannot work. And I go and chase those down very aggressively. And I'll do that at the complete detriment of code quality, at any sort of systems design in some cases, just because I need to get something to work. And then I'll do that. But once I've kind of got something working, I'll go back and start to form abstractions around it so that it becomes easier and faster over time. And after I have some conviction that people care about this work and like it's possible to do. So that's my general philosophy around is how to do like project management and software development broadly. For this project, I think the other thing is because I think I navigate this code base very well personally. If I needed to bring folks on, it would take a little bit But yeah, I'm starting to also build out some of those abstractions as well. They sound useful.
Yes.
I'm Jolly, myself live. I have an anecdote to your question.
Yes.
And the anecdote is I do a lot of transcription and I use Whisper large model. And you know, if a beam of 10, it works really well. And I'm amazed how well it can take your text and break it down into stickers.
Yeah.
But it formats the text terribly. And then so I then tried to use ChatGPT to reformat the text, and it just reinvents it. And I found that DeepSeek will reformat it, but it's always busy. And so now I'm using Claude, and Claude does a good job of reformatting.
That's been my experience for it. Claude tends to outperform for a lot of practical tasks in my
Yeah. And then my question is, how close are you to putting this in a kit that you can export it to other places? And do you feel Granicus breathing down your neck?
No, I don't feel Granicus breathing. I candidly, I don't think they care. Like, I think a lot of what they do is pretty. Yeah, a lot of the software they build is so that folks can sort of comply with various laws, and I feel like they don't really have a strong incentive to go and do much more innovative work beyond that I think is possible. But your first question, which is this at a point where I can export it to other localities? It's not there yet, but I don't think it will take a tremendous amount of time to make that possible. There's always going to be an upfront amount of effort involved in understanding how a meeting is proceedings like actually run and how to break those down. But I think I can get those to a point where, if at least in the near term, if you're like, hey, I want to bring on a new meeting, it'll take about 2 weeks or so, and then slowly tying up.
I can do a follow-up, and all the community board meetings are on YouTube. Do you do anything with that?
I'm not currently. That is a common request. I would like to at some point. So I have like a meeting request coverage form on the website. The most common ones are state assembly and state senate, but then community boards come right behind that.
So I also use the tool a lot, and it's one of my favorite cards about it. When you were going over traffic, you said that a lot of the traffic is coming from search traffic, which is something that I've also noticed, and I want get your view on it. A lot of it, something really cool is looking up like the particular question about a specific agency or something, and one of the top results being something from like the specific section from.
Has that happened to you?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So ask you if that's something that you're considering when you're when you're like designing the web page or like prompting the LLMs to break into sections. Is that something that you're considering?
So yeah, what are you considering thinking about SEO? Absolutely, it is like a first-class consideration for all the work that I've done on this. The design of those pages, all the meta tags, all the like social cards, like yeah, I do all that stuff so that it can rank. And then even when it comes to language models, it's important to me that a page can stand on its own. Like I want it to be useful, even if you aren't like clicking next chapter for like 10 minutes. I want people to be able to link to them, and I want them to be relevant to people, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do. So it's a first class consideration, and it is. I credit that with sort of the kind of growth that it has had, in addition to a lot of the word of mouth. But yeah, totally, it's important.
Curious, how do you think about just keeping up with the latest on LLMs? You can use them better, how you can get around some limitations while you're one person who has a bunch of tagging to do and everything else.
Yeah. So I think a good example of how I've done that that serves me practically is the speaker stuff. Like every time a new model came out, I had various methodologies that were already kind of built. I could like run a script and be like, did it get the right answer? Did it get the right answer? Did it get the right answer? So every time I would get a new model, I would do that. So that's one way I do it, to see if a model is getting to the point where it's able to do the task that I care about pretty well. But then other than that, like there are many times when I just want to go do something else for a little bit and figure out if the model can, and sometimes I do get distracted by that. But yeah. I don't know. It's challenging.
Hi. I saw your talk last year, so it was very nice to see the great progress since that. I was thinking about how a big part of what seems to make your process work is the experience you've accumulated from manually going through this. And I'm wondering if you've explored giving the AI some sort of context about its previous work, whether it means it's tagged before or looking at past meetings when labeling future meetings.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, I'm curious if you've explored giving LLM context about its past work when it's doing future work, sort of, because that seems like that's a big part of your methodology as a human reviewer.
Yes, I have not actively done that yet. But one idea that I do have for this is if I want to get a new meeting up, what I would do is I walk through my methodology in great length with an LLM and with some of the long context models, say, here are 10 transcripts from the state Senate. What are the similar sections that I should look for? Things like that, which give me quick context and allow me to design, you can imagine a world where you design abstractions that are like, oh, these are the sections I should break things down into, et cetera. Anyway, so that's time. But yeah, that is one. Thanks, everyone.